Congrats on finishing your introduction sections. I know that those were super fun and you had lots of fun and it was so much fun. You can tell that it's fun because I'm saying fun a whole bunch. Now we're going to work on the methods. A little bit easier, just a little more precise. The methods might have three sections. Just so you know, the organization of your method section is up to you. It should just make sense. But if you want to use kind of the default method for your methods, look at the right. That's kind of the organization that I'm looking for. So we have our level 1 heading for methods. Then we have our level 2 headings, participants, materials, procedures. You can put your information in whatever section you want. You can put it in whatever order you want. You don't need to use the level 2 headings. As long as all the information that I ask for is there, I will be happy. So even though I'm going to talk about these next three sections as if they are three separate sections, know that if you want to put it all in one nice paragraph that makes sense, mwah, I'm fine with that. Also, just to be clear, where it says words, you're not supposed to put the words there. Please actually put your words there. If you turn that into me, I will laugh and then I will fail you. So for your participants, the two most important things that you'll need to state are your sample size, so how many people are actually in your sample, and then the sampling method that you used. So if you remember our lectures from chapter 6 and 7, we talked about 4 different sampling methods. Random selection will not be one of the sampling methods that you use. You'll be choosing from convenience, purposive, or quota sampling. Now, there might be some relevant demographic information that you might not know yet. So know that when you do your final draft of the paper, once you've gathered all your data, you can update that. So if you want to put in the age range or the number of people of each gender who participate in your study, if once you know that information, you can update your method section. So here's an example of a participation section, right? You can see that I've stated my sample size and where I got the students from. I'm talking about my sampling method, right? Your sampling method could be different. Maybe you reach out to people by sliding in their DMs. I think that's what the kids call it. And you can also mention any relevant aspects of the participants. So, for example, even though I reached out to them on the Citrus Students College, the Citrus Students College page, the Citrus College Students page, they didn't actually need to be current students. So, alumni were able to participate, teachers and administrators were able to participate. Next is materials. So if there are specific things that you are using for your study, for a lot of you, this will just be your survey. Because if you're not administering things in person, then you'll be just using an online survey. So talk about that, right? How many questions are on the survey? Where did you get those questions from? If you are basing it off of an existing survey, that would be a good place to do a citation of that existing survey. But you want to describe what you actually used, whether it's pen and paper, an online survey, etc., to do your study. Here's an example of a material section, right? Pretty straightforward. For some of you, you might just have one that is a sentence long. So Yeah, it doesn't really have to be anything more than this. And then we have our procedures. Our procedures might be the hardest part for some of you. Just walk me through chronologically every step of your study so that if I'm reading your procedures, I can do your study just by following the directions. Remember a few weeks ago, I was talking about this being like a cookbook. This is your cookbook. So, how did you get people into your study if you haven't clearly stated that earlier? What did they do and for how long, right? We gave them a 30-question survey that took them 10 minutes. And then how did you end the study? Make sure that you include a debriefing, which in some cases is just saying that you thank the participants for their participation. If you use some sort of deception, then this would be where you explained the deception that you used. So here's my example of my procedures. You can read through it and you can see that I'm talking about first of all, I'm not mentioning everything that I mentioned in the earlier section. So after people consented to participate in our study, it took about 15 minutes, or sorry, 5 minutes to complete the survey. Then I offer them an iTunes gift card and blah, 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 right? So I'm talking about everything that was done in the study. And then after the study ended, they were thanked for their participation and they were given the contact information of the research team, which is very important. Few tips from old Professor Jeff. Keep it short. It does not have to be 3 to 7 pages. Please don't try to fill it with fluff. It does not have to be long. It just has to have all the information that I'm asking for. Don't repeat information. So if you just mentioned it 2 sentences ago, please don't repeat it, right? That's one of the big things that I'm looking for. How concise can you be with your writing? And again, the level 2 headings, participants, materials, and procedures are a guideline. If you don't feel like you need them, you do not have to use them. They're just an easy way of organizing all your information. And if you want to use level 3 headings, you can do that. Whatever you need to do to keep your paper organized, you can do that. Informed consent. Everybody loves informed consent. Get that consent. One thing that I'd recommend is just Googling informed consent forms, or Yahooing or Binging, I guess, if you want to, informed consent forms, and just looking at a few samples. Your informed consent form does not have to be super lengthy. Usually you can get it in a good page, but here are some guidelines for what I'm requiring for your informed consent form. Know that this is basically a checklist that I am using in order to make sure that you've covered all the things that are mandatory for the informed consent form. So, one, your font has to be readable, and the informed consent form needs to have language that is clear to the participants, right? You don't want to confuse people so that they don't know what they are consenting to. Also, don't write it in the first person. So when people read it, it shouldn't say, I consent to participate. I know that I am consenting. Write it in the second person, right? You're being asked to participate in a research study. This is what I'm asking you to do. It shouldn't take you longer than 15 minutes to complete this study, right? And then also, you 100% have to provide contact information for me, just my email address, and one of the members of your research team. A lot of teams will create a new Gmail account that will be their like team contact info. And the reason why I don't recommend doing that is because somebody has to check that email. And more than likely, none of you will check that email, right? So, in all my years of teaching, 27, I have never had a student actually receive an email from a participant of their study. It's bound to happen eventually, but just one team member just has to put their email address on the informed consent form so that when you if there are any questions for any reason, people have a way of reaching out to you. Other things in your informed consent. You need to explain the purpose of the research. Why are you doing this research study? Think on it for a second. I'm going to take a sip of my Rockstar. You're doing this for a grade, right? The reason for this research study is because you're trying to get a grade in this class, Sci 203, Research Methods in Psychology at Citrus College. So people should know that. That is the reason why you're making them do whatever you're making them do. Then also tell them how long you're going to need them, right? Is it 3 weeks? Is it 3 minutes? What are they going to be doing? Am I just answering some questions about how much I love Pepsi Cola? Am I telling you all my deepest, darkest secrets? Am I answering questions about depression? Am I doing math problems? Tell me what I'm doing. And then, are there any risks? Your risks might be pretty minimal, right? Boredom, the feeling of wasting your time, wrist cramps, but you have to inform people of the risk involved in your study. And then, if there are any benefits to them or to other people, right? If your hypothesis is supported, what does that mean for the world, right? What are you going to better understand? Do they get any benefit from participating in your study? The joy of helping people get closer to graduation, right? Explain that. And then also make sure that you describe any confidentiality and your protection of their private information. Who's going to see the data that they are sharing? Your research team, your professor, right? Are you just going to post all their data on the internet, or are you going to protect it? The last two things that you want to state are that they are being asked to participate in research study. You can tie this in with your purpose. So you're being asked to participate in a research study that is part of a course requirement at Citrus College. This is for our Sci 203 research methods class, performed under the supervision of our professor, Jeffrey Thompson, right? That would be a really great statement that you can probably use word for word in your informed consent. Wink. The other thing that you want to state is that their participation is voluntary. If you remember Milgram's experiment, voluntary participation is very important, right? People need to know that they can leave the study without penalty at any time. You cannot pressure your participants to stay in the study. Please. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Just to wrap up, let us talk about the survey. Okay, so when you turn in your methods section, there are going to be three main things. You're going to turn in the actual methods section. You're going to show me a copy of your informed consent. You're also going to show me your survey, the actual questions that you're going to ask to measure the relationship between your independent variable and your dependent variable. Now, when you are figuring out what questions should be on your survey, this is how you should start. What is my independent variable and what is my dependent variable, right? We're going to start with our constructs and we're going to work our way down. So what's the best way of measuring my independent variable and dependent variable? For example, if I'm trying to measure GPA, I could just ask people, what is their GPA? Do I need any more questions to measure GPA? No. That part of my survey is done, right? If I wanted to measure somebody's level of depression, I might need 10 or 20 questions because there are lots of symptoms of depression. And it's going to depend on what my construct is, what my operational definition is. So start with the construct, know what you're trying to measure, and then work your way down and figure out what the best way of measuring your independent variable is and your dependent variable. Then, once you've made your questions, just real quickly look at that content validity. Have you measured all the relevant aspects of those variables, right? You have 10 questions for depression, but you haven't asked about suicidal ideation, depressed mood, apathy, right? Make sure you're covering all the important aspects of those variables. If you're having trouble thinking of questions, look at other surveys or measurement tools that have measured the same thing. You have probably 5 good resources that probably use surveys to measure the thing that you're measuring. So if you need to, base your surveys off of that research and then, of course, cite when necessary. Then finally, it doesn't matter to me the length of your survey. It is possible to have a solid survey that is just 2 questions, right? If you're looking at the relationship between age and GPA, all you need is 2 questions. So don't try to make a super impressive survey that's super long because one, that's more work for you and you don't need more work. And two, at a certain point, you start to water down your survey. So just really focus on measuring your independent variable and your dependent variable. Get real specific with those questions and make sure you've covered enough, and then you'll be good to go. And as always, my email inbox is open. You are always free to send your questions to me for feedback. Have a good one.